Welcome to The Craft. I'm your host, May Globus. This podcast is a collection of intimate conversations on artistry, mastery, and life with talented, passionately curious creatives and entrepreneurs. Most are dear friends, some are those I've admired from afar. I hope you enjoy these conversations, this exploration of the humanity that connects all of us, as much as I do having them. Thank you for being here and for listening. This episode is brought to you by Before, an incredible new self-care brand that just launched their first products, a line of purifying toothpastes. I'm obsessive about my teeth and brush them usually 3 times a day, so I'm super excited to be using Before. It ticks off many boxes of what a good toothpaste should be. Their custom supermint flavor actually tastes really good, and the consistency is silky, and at the same time, it doesn't leak out of the tube, which is a total pet peeve of mine. It's also non-abrasive, so it doesn't destroy your tooth enamel. All the harmful ingredients have been replaced by clean alternatives, and their custom blend of fluoride and dentist-approved ingredients totally promotes optimal mouth health. Before also deeply cares about our planet. Their tubes are made from 100% recyclable plant-based sugarcane and creates 50% less carbon footprint than traditional toothpaste tubes. As you all can tell from the show, I'm a huge fan of good, purposeful design, and let me tell you, the design and color palette of these are beautiful. The tube stands upright on your counter and makes your bathroom look minimal and chic. Visit their website, before.com, and enter the code CRAFT10, CRAFT10, to receive 10% off your entire purchase. One-time use per customer. I'm a huge fan of what they stand for. You won't be sorry, and your teeth and the planet will thank you. As a number of you know, I'm also a certified sound therapy practitioner and founder of Oto Healing, a sound therapy studio and practice. Sound has been a healing modality through many cultures for thousands of years. Oto's approach to sound is rooted in both art and science, the art being the history of sound, the science being quantum physics, biology, brainwave states, and more. All listeners of the show get 15% off their first private 1-hour session. Visit otohealing.com to book yours now. Reanna Evoy has a playful spirit and imagination that just can't be replicated or replaced. Her life and work are beautiful reflections of being born creative and free. She co-founded Butter Magazine with her friend Kris Blizzard, was an art director of Enroute Magazine, creative director of Aldo Shoes and then Kitten Ace, and is now co-founder of creative studio Super Bonjour. She was born in Ontario, but the family moved to Vancouver. Her young and fun parents were fans of the show The Beachcombers and wanted to go west as a result. Until she was 18, Reanna flew back to Ontario to spend summers with her Ukrainian grandparents on an organic farm outside of a small town, wearing babushkas and clogs to churn butter, farm, beekeep, build sheds, climb trees, spend time with animals, and break bread with neighbours. As a teen, she was shy and quiet, but art was an avenue for expression. She painted apples purple, drew complete fashion collections, and was obsessed with print magazines. Despite her artistic leanings, she went into science at university and floundered. She finally made a change after a conversation with her mother, who asked Reanna what brought her joy and pointed out that she was an artist at heart. She then switched into art history with a minor in fine art. Her goal at the time was to become a curator. Interestingly enough, it was discovering Starbucks that piqued her interest in design, and it was then that she fell in love with branding. In this conversation, we explore her culturally rich childhood, what she loves about curation and world building, the things she learned creating a print magazine, her chapter as creative director at Aldo and working with top photographers like Cass Bird and Tim Barber, how major shoots for brands are orchestrated, the way spirituality, meditation, and breathwork helps her channel creativity, how Super Bonjour finds what makes clients shine, living joyously as connected humans in a capitalist world, and much more. Please enjoy this wonderful exploration of life, work, and one's own soul with this extraordinary human and dear friend, Reanna Evoy. Reanna Evoy, welcome to The Craft.
Thank you, May. I'm so excited to be here and
I'm
honored.
so excited to have you here. How are you feeling?
Truthfully, extremely nervous and vulnerable. I had to do a little meditation before arriving, but mostly it's because I am a very visual person. I speak with my hands. I draw. I see things in colors and shapes. So words and articulation are always a little bit more out of my reach. So I'm hoping that people can actually hear and understand what I'm saying without having to draw a photo or a picture or use my hands to explain things.
Oh, you're great. You're going to do amazing. Let's go back in time.
Da-da-da.
Dun, 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 dun. Ontario.
Oh, God. The dirty secret.
Yeah, the dirty secret. She was born in Ontario, guys.
I am. Not very many people know this, but I was born in Ontario, and my parents moved to British Columbia because they loved Beachcombers, the TV show.
No.
For real. So family loved Beachcombers, so we decided to pack our things up and move to Vancouver when I was a little child. And so I was in Vancouver for the majority of my life, but I did have deep roots in Ontario as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'd go back and you'd spend summers with your grandparents.
I did. Absolutely. That was a wonderful time for me. So when I was a child, my parents didn't have the resources for childcare. So what they would do craftily is throw me on an airplane and send me back east. So I was pretty much bi-coastal. So I would spend my summers with my mother's family, and I would spend the rest of the year with my parents in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. I know. And we were talking the other day, and you were just describing your time with your grandparents, and they're from the Ukraine. So they're Ukrainian immigrants, or
That's
they
right,
were.
yeah.
And it was a very kind of homesteady, pioneering summer childhood you had.
Absolutely.
Like churning butter.
Yeah, a lot of churning butter. So it was such a huge contrast from living in the city in Vancouver. So I grew up in North Vancouver particularly. But in Ontario, what I would do is I would arrive, my grandparents would pick me up, probably get lost somewhere in Toronto because we didn't know how to get back to the farm. I'd get to the farm, and then suddenly I was transported to the Ukraine post-war. So it was a completely different experience for me. At that time, they lived on a huge organic farm. It was 30 acres outside of a small town called London, Ontario. The town was called Glanworth, population probably 4. And what we would do would we would be one with the earth. We would farm, we would beekeep, we would like play with rabbits. I would just completely immerse myself in nature, and I was completely free. Climbing trees, sleeping in apple trees at night, being terrified because I was sleeping in the apple tree at night, and then chasing turkeys. It was just
Wearing babushkas.
Oh yeah, wearing babushkas. That was also part of it. Wooden clogs. I didn't even dress like the rest of the kids. I was completely immersed with like embroidered blouses that my grandmother would give me, and everything was very, very rich and vibrant in terms of like the textures and the patterns and colors. The food, it was just like we made everything. You know, we built the sheds, we harvested the honey, we wore babushkas, got our hands dirty in the dirt. We would have like huge moments where the whole entire family would come together, and it'd be like the harvesting of sweet peas, for example. And so we would pick all the peas and then shell the peas and then freeze the peas and then can the peas. And it was a completely different upbringing for me. It was very vibrant. It was very culturally rich. We had a lot of like feasts, I guess you could say. So there was like always a Sunday feast where the rest of the community, the Ukrainian community, would come to my grandparents' farm, and we would break bread, and it was boisterous with crazy music playing, and everyone was speaking Ukrainian and never knew what the hell was going on, but it was so much fun. And we would eat until we were full and then pass out and then repeat. So it was a completely different upbringing. Like that's how my childhood was formed. I did that until I was around 18. And then I was like, peace, let's get out of here. Let's go to see other parts of the world. But it was really instrumental to my upbringing and really being in touch with my heritage, which was a wonderful and fortunate thing to have.
Yeah, and I remember you saying too that freedom and being able to be free and wild is so important to you. So
Yeah.
having that kind of summer every year would be just so nurturing for who you are.
Absolutely. I mean, I think all the other kids were going to summer camps like Elphinstone or whatever it was called, but I would be in the farm and free, completely free.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge narrative for me as well as an adult too. It's like searching for that.
Hmm. I'm so curious about this feast you speak of, just because I love
Oh
food.
my gosh.
So what would the table spread be
It would
like?
be outrageous. So my grandparents would have a huge table, and it would be covered with all these gorgeous tablecloths and tapestries that were Ukrainian and beautifully embroidered. Then it would just be covered with food, from pickled beets, beautiful cans of wild sour cherries. There would be everything would be covered in dill, pungent garlic. Of course, there'd be pierogies, and of course, there would be cabbage rolls, which are called halopshi, by the way, just in case you want to know. Beautiful, like the grandparents would. We lived off all the vegetables and animals on the farm too. So we would, probably kill a turkey or a rabbit for the occasion as well. And we would eat that with everyone involved, make our own bread. My grandfather made wine, which was extremely strong and natural and beautiful. And it would just be like covered in food, and everybody would hang out and talk about everything. I honestly didn't know what was going on. I just ate all the food and was super happy about it. But food
That's
was
the
love,
best.
Our family
Yeah.
food was love, and
Mm.
it was a really beautiful experience.
Ah, I just love that. I love breaking bread with friends and
Hmm.
family, and just it's such an intimate time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, even if the party's big, like if you're sitting around a table,
No,
it still has that feeling of like, oh yeah, I'm here with you.
absolutely. And it was a generosity. It was a giving back. Like that was the feeling. It was everybody coming together and incorporating the food that they would bring as well, talking about stories, sharing stories. It was a complete love fest. That's
Mm.
what the feeling was. It was not fussy. There was no etiquette. People didn't know which fork to use. It was just boisterous and loud and full of love
Ah,
and
so
delicious and
good.
nurturing. It was wonderful.
What a memory.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that memory has just so many like all of your senses would be triggered, like the smell, like what you were seeing, like what you were hearing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It was a complete and utter contrast from other families. And it was just so grateful that I got to experience that. And yeah, I think it did shape a lot of the things that I gravitate towards. So like the sensory aspect of it, the smells, you're right. Um, how people feel in a space. Those sorts of things are really important to me. And I could see how everyone was fully engaged and fully in love.
Mm.
And it was all the things that were put together at that meal that made people feel good about themselves and welcomed. And I think that was really a huge, that was very instrumental for me. And I
Mm.
think that thread is seen throughout my work and how I live now.
Yeah, I think it's seen in your personality. I mean, like that you have that you
Oh
do have this
man,
like warmth to you. You do have this like fun, nature to you that is just like it's
very
really,
playful.
yeah, it's playful, it's magnetic. So yeah, I could see how that would be a thread. I'd love to know more about your mom and dad and
Oh,
what
my
they were like.
parents, they're so
Yeah.
sweet. Oh, my parents are so lovely. They had me very young, so I was lucky to have a very young mom and dad who were extremely cool. My mom was so cool. She's still so cool. So she was a hairstylist, and she worked for a super fancy salon in Ontario. And then when she moved to BC, uh, I think she worked in West Vancouver at the time. And my father was an electrician and then a police officer in the canine department. A whole other story. We had a police dog living in our house. Complicated.
Oh my
You could
gosh.
not bring drugs into my house or skateboards, which is probably why I was so straight. And yeah, so that was fun. And then my dad ended up leaving the force and working for a yacht broker. But my mom was very young and cool. So we would, do really fun things like listen to David Bowie or George Michael and dance in the living room and have a ton of fun. She was so trendy and had the coolest hair and would give me the coolest haircut, like really awesome, like the mixed squeeb in the 80s. We would go shopping and buy like cool pink spandex in the 80s. She was so much fun. And my dad was a very lovable very generous, caring man. So I grew up with a lot of love, and they were really good role models for me as well. So they're still together. They're very much in love. They travel a lot. They live in Mexico in the winter. They really embrace life. And it was also very fortunate to have them as parents. I was really lucky.
Where do you think you get that artistic side, the painting the apple purple, as you called it
Oh my
in our
gosh.
last conversation?
That's right. Yes, I used to paint pears and apples purple, and my teacher would be like, "That is not the right color, Reanna." I'd be like, "Use your imagination." What if it was? Couldn't it be though? Where did I get that from? I think that both my parents are actually quite creative and artistic, but didn't necessarily follow suit on that. So I think seeing my mother being a hairstylist, that was a creative job. It's more of a service, but she was extremely creative around it. Her fashion sense was very creative, especially in the 80s. Shout out to shoulder pads. And she was really in tune with music. So we had a lot of records growing up. And I think that creativity was always there, but I don't think it was like outward. Like she wasn't a painter or an artist per se. My father as well was also, he used to take photos when I was very young. He was an excellent photographer. It was a hobby for him. But that again was like the side gig. So it was always the side project. It wasn't like the project. So I think I got it from them, but I didn't think it was possible at the time that could be my life. So I did gravitate towards science and biology and more academics when I was younger, and then realized I actually have a different place in this world, and it's in creativity.
Yeah. Tell me more about what you were like as a teenager.
Oh man, teens. I was very shy, very much insecure, as all teenagers I think can be. And I guess I kind of had a lot of friends in many different groups, so I didn't have a clique. I would move around from group to group. Definitely shy. Which is super weird because I certainly wasn't when I was a kid. That happened later in life where I became more like the good girl and studious. So I spent a lot of time studying, and I still did a lot of art. So I was very much like drawing and painting in my house, in my room, reading all those Babysitter Club books from
Love that.
back to front or front to back, the other way, because that's how you read. Really obsessed with magazines. Obsessed. Loved me a 17 magazine, a YM, a Sassy. My entire room was plastered with magazine swipes. So I would tear them out of a magazine and throw them right up on my wall. So it would be covered with Benetton ads and Guess ads for some crazy reason. Spree. So I was very interested in fashion at the time. I would be obsessed with fashion television. I was obsessed with Jeannie Becker.
Oh, yes.
Completely. And I was interested in trends at the time. So I didn't necessarily want it for me to look a certain way, but I just was fascinated with the psychology around it, which is kind of bizarre as a teenager. But I was like, what's up with this new trend? Like, why are we all wearing bell bottoms? And my mom used to wear bell bottoms, and what's up with that? So I would like research it and dive into all the fashion books and trying to find out what was next. So curious. So I was quiet, but very deeply interested in fashion. Oh my gosh. The other crazy thing I used to do, I forgot about this, was I used to draw like complete looks, like outfits, like a fashion designer would. And I would build collections. And I didn't know how to sew, but I would just loved drawing and creating outfits or creating spaces where these outfits could live. So even as a young girl, as a teenager, I was still really interested in that. I was very, very good girl too. Right, Mom?
So world building, it sounds like, and you and I were talking about how because I was the same as you. I loved fashion as well, and I
Yeah.
loved magazines. And we were talking about how fashion is kind of this center of all these different things, like music and photography and art and design. It's kind of like this magnet for all of these really other interesting passions that one can have. And that's why I loved it too. And also, too, just to understand that you can understand history through fashion
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. And through art too.
Hmm.
The context in which these were created, the works was created, has always been fascinating for me. It's interesting to think that, what was the cultural context or zeitgeist at the time that made an artist choose to create a work is always very interesting. And um, it's also really fascinating when you think of things that weren't created before. You often think that things have already been done. And when you look at the past, you're like, you mean nobody did a color field painting like a Rothko? Like, wow, like that was incredible. Or the Impressionists being completely subversive to what was already happening. So more religious figurative paintings, for example, and it was like a change. So it is interesting when you look at what was happening at the time, and same with fashion. I don't have a deep history knowledge of fashion per se, other than I just love it and it looks really cool, and I'm fascinated by it. But it is probably the same situation. It's how people would want to express themselves at the time and what was
Hmm.
important to them.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. And art actually became what you studied when you went to UVic.
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't study art right away. I had a little bit of a, I was, you're very young when you go to university, and I was fortunate to go. And my grandfather, my Ukrainian grandfather, was saved up a lot of money for me and was like, this is for you to go to school. You need to be educated. So it was a huge honor for me to be able to go to school. And it was very much a lot of pressure. So at the time, I was like, I need to make this worth the effort that my grandparents did for me. So I'm going to go into science. Let's study biology, right? Because I'm going to be a biologist, obviously. That made zero sense, but it did kind of make sense in the terms of it was like research, and I was very fascinated with research. And so I did go into. I was accepted to UVic and into the science department, and I fumbled around that for a while, thinking this was my future. Maybe marine biology. Is probably like really into dolphins at the time. You know how it is. And at one point, I was like, this doesn't feel like me at all. I know this isn't me. I'm feeling very much like a pressure to do something that I don't want to do. And I was floundering a lot. So I had a conversation with my mom about it. And I was like, Mom, like, I don't know, this isn't me. What do I do? And she was like, okay, let's figure it out. So we had a conversation uh, around our past, my past as a child, and what brought me joy. And what brought me joy was dancing around the living room to George Michael Freedom, playing the drums to Phil Collins in the Air Tonight, obviously, painting, drawing, collecting flowers, being free. And she was like, you're an artist, sweetheart. Like, follow your heart.
Hmm.
So at that point, I said, you know what, you're right, Mom. And it was really difficult to have that conversation with her. I was really nervous because I was worried I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. And I didn't know what art meant in terms of a career. I wasn't sure. Like I only knew that you could paint and sell paintings. Was that it? And I didn't know about what I do currently. I didn't even realize that there was art directors and creative directors and photographers who make a living out of it. So I said, I'm going into art history. So I studied that with a minor in fine arts. So that's where that happened. So I did a little switcheroo halfway through, and it was well worth it. And it felt like, oh, these are my people. I know what I'm doing now. I'm feeling very confident. It was so insatiable, like the appetite towards art. And I felt very much seen, and I felt like I had a community at that point. Yeah.
So wonderful that your mom helped you just kind of hone in and say like, listen, sweetheart, you're an artist. That's incredible
Mhm.
that there wasn't that pressure from her, that she just wanted you to be
No, no.
expressive and joyful.
I know, and my mom also was really crafty. She had a lot of clientele that were just a wide breadth of different occupations, and one of her clients was a life coach. And I think at that point, my mom had a conversation with her, and they discussed me in a very awesome way. And that's how that happened too. So my mother was like able to reach out to people to be like, how do we make our little girl, follow the path that she needs to follow, and what are the steps that I can do to make that happen? So she was very resourceful as well.
Oh,
So
that's
lucky.
so great. And it was when you got interested in linear art that, you started to see that there were other things that you could do within this realm of art, and but
Mhm.
more particularly in design.
Yeah, that's so true. When I was at UVic, the goal was to be a curator. I wanted to work within the fine art space as a curator. So I love the idea of looking at art and bringing collections together. I love that. Again, that's another theme, right? It's like picking out things, curatorial lens, and bringing things together like a director. So I was totally on that path. And then when I was taking fine arts, like drawing and painting, I was super into using my ruler, lining things up. I was really interested in type. I was really interested in photography and bringing those together. I didn't. I knew that there was graphic design. I understood that that was an occupation, but I didn't know that there was also an art director or a creative director role. I didn't understand that that was even an option. So basically, what I did was I again went to my mother and was like, "Hey, mom, there's all this cool other things I can do. Like, there's this graphic design and there's art direction." She's like, "Okay, let me hook you up." So she again um, allowed me to meet with one of her clients who happened to be an art director for a magazine. And we met and we talked about that. And then it was like a total light bulb went off. And I'm like, oh my God, I love magazines. I've always loved magazines. Check out my wall from when I was 18 with my Benetton ads. I love photography. I love making worlds. I love all this. What is this? And at that point, I realized that I really wanted to go into design. But also, there was another really instrumental part. This is cool. I'm going to keep talking, right? This is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
podcast
I
after
love
all.
it.
But at the time, it was, oh gosh, like we're talking late 90s. Okay. That's how old I am. And Starbucks had just arrived in Seattle and it was starting to um, populate throughout North America. So we had a Starbucks, and it was the first time that we ever had, like, I remember specifically thinking, what the hell is Starbucks, and why do all the Starbucks look the same, and what's up with this logo? And when you go in, everyone's playing smooth jazz. It doesn't matter which Starbucks you're in, it all tastes the same. Who made this, and why is it like what is this? And I didn't realize that it was the magic of branding, right? Which is so naive at the time, but it was blew my mind. And I'm like, I want to do that. I want to make those worlds, but like, better. Clearly,
Obviously.
obviously, right? So that's when I was interested in design. So I went back to school right away. And I didn't want to go to another university that needed another 4 years of education. I really wanted to learn publishing. I really wanted to learn graphic design and understand the tools. So then I went to Langara for a year and studied design and publishing, specifically magazine publishing.
And then you made a magazine.
And then I made a magazine.
Butter Magazine,
You
which
know it,
I
girl.
I know. I remember reading it. And when you told me the other day that you created it, it just like blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it is, oh wow, that was such a fun time for me. My goodness. So when I was in Langara, I met a wonderful friend who is still one of my dear friends, Kris Blizzard. We both were studying publishing. When we graduated, we knew we wanted to work in magazines, and we lived in Vancouver, and it was pretty limited to what we could do and where we could go. And I believe we were probably at the sugar refinery eating pierogies and beer, and thinking, we can do this, right? Like, we can totally make our own magazine, right? And we did. And that was a real experience in school for me, because we were very naive. I probably would never make a magazine on my own now, knowing how expensive and time consuming it is. But you do crazy things when you're in your 20s, so that's what we did. And Kris and I spent about 4, maybe even 5 years doing a quarterly publication, and we had also an editor named Ryan Roddy, and we had tons of cool contributors like Kamel Harris and Candace Meyer and the late Gregory Crow. We just were so young and ready to create community around creativity and photography, and that's how we did it. With the generosity of the community, truly, because it wasn't a money-making adventure. It was really about expression and craft.
Yeah. But you did have to learn how to do ad sales too.
Well, kind of, but Kris was probably better at that than me. I was more behind the scenes, I suppose, but Kris did go out and find ads with Adidas or even database, or
so good. Yeah.
good old database.
Good old database.
Melrich's coffee shop, like whatever we could do, whatever we could muster up just to get a little bit of cash to pay for printing, truly, because it was extremely expensive.
It still is.
Especially being, young and living at home, and like, who has that, right?
Yeah.
So we did our best.
Was Butter before Ion came around?
Yes.
Yeah. Like you were, I was like, I think you were before that.
I think so. Yeah. We were really inspired by Vice magazine, truly, because they were a free publication. They were distributed across North America at the time. And we thought, well, why don't we just try that? And so we did. I think, I'm pretty sure we're before Ion.
Yeah. Well, and then you stayed in magazines because then you moved to Montreal and joined Enroute.
That's
as
right.
An art director.
How the hell did that happen?
How the hell did it happen?
I know how it happened.
Tell us.
Yeah. So, that was a good time. So I ended up moving to Montreal, and I ended up staying there for a decade, which is a really, really, really rich and amazing experience for me. I think what ended up happening was I was working in advertising and design at the time at some local agencies here in Vancouver. My art director knew that I loved magazines, and he found an ad in, I don't know, like the National Post or something, that said Enroute was looking for an art director. And he said, girl, you got to apply. Oh my gosh, I'm never going to get it. How could I possibly get it? I'm just so young. I hardly have any experience. He's like, no, girl, you're going to get it. Go for it. So I put together my portfolio and sent it to them, and they hired me. And I think they hired me because of Butter,
of course,
and because of all the like ingenuity and complete and utter. I was just so tenacious and excited and curious as a young designer, that I think that they just were like, let's give this girl a try. So I packed my bags within a month and moved to Montreal, and completely immersed myself in an actual real magazine. It was such a dream come true for me. Complete dream come true.
So what did you take out of that experience? Like that first big magazine, it runs like a machine experience.
Oh, yeah, no, it was like legit, right? So I was working in independent magazines and doing it however Kris and I were, intuitively creating a magazine. And then I had to suddenly find myself in the real world of magazines, which was extremely high paced, very, very quick. A ton of work. Like, we were working till midnight some days, just trying to make deadlines. And it was really an amazing experience because it was very, very, very collaborative. So you're working with editors and writers, illustrators, copy editors, proofreaders, fact checkers. This whole entire team is coming together to create this one book for readers. And we put so much love and integrity into the work. And it was a really wonderful experience to see that collaboration come together. And it really honed in my skills for storytelling. So what would end up happening is we got really deeply involved with the editorial lineup. even as a creative director, or excuse me, I was the art director at the time, we were involved. So what were the stories? What was the lineup? Then we would read all the stories and interpret them artistically. So taking the words and then creating the visuals that would correspond with the words. And that was just so much fun because the sky was the limit, and we could change the design, and we would change the grid, and we would change the typography, learn ways in which to engage the reader through type, through imagery, get excitement out of that, create stories through visual expression. So it was a beautiful experience for me. Oh my gosh, like the things I got to do, like just unbelievable. The people I got to meet, places I got to travel to. I still can't believe it happened. And it was such a
Yes.
prime time because magazines were still vibrant and still very much a legitimate occupation. They're not, print is harder right now at this point. It's more digital. So I just was so grateful to have that experience before, things changed, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. And just, you were young and you were hungry and like
Oh, I
you
was
had like
young.
the energy. But then you went to Australia because Australia called.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I did. So I think there's always this moment where, as a creative, there's a lot of like, it's very physical and mental work. And, the capacity to create is very high, and companies want you to keep contributing, keep giving. And at some point, I think you have to stop and refill your cup, so that you're inspired again to create more awesome work. And at that point, I was thinking, I think it's time to fill the cup. And I had this premonition to go to Australia. And so I just did that. It was 2010. And I left my job. Again, so naive and so young. Like I would never do this right now. I was like, yeah, I'm out. See you later. Going to leave my dream job and I'm just going to go to Australia. Peace. And my intention was to stay there. And I loved it. I fell in love with that country. Holy smokes. It was just so beautiful and warm and had all the things that I crave in life. So I did that. But that didn't, I was only there for a short period of time because I ran out of money. Let's face it.
But then you got a fateful
Oh my
reach
gosh.
out.
I sure did. So here I am thinking about like, what am I going to do in Australia? I have $1.50 in my bank account. Maybe I should go look for a job. Like there was such a vibrant magazine culture in Australia at the time. There was Oyster Magazine and Rush Magazine. I was really gravitating towards those. But then it was like also a beach. So I chose beach life, which like depleted my bank account pretty quick. And I was thinking, what am I going to do? And I got an email from a gentleman in Montreal who was running the art department of Aldo, art department and marketing department. So the creative director of Aldo reached out to me and said, hey girl.
Hey, girl, hey.
Hey girl, hey, how would you like to work for us? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, do I want to go back to Montreal? Do I want to work for Aldo shoes? Do I like shoes? Yes, I do. I love them. And then, I was hemming and hawing. And then he was like, just to sweeten the deal, I'll fly you to New York and you can come on a photo shoot for our next campaign. Who is, come to the campaign and, work with the photographer we're working with, who happened to be at the time Terry Richardson. And, why don't you just do that? Why don't you just come to New York and work with Terry Richardson?
You're like picking your jaw off the floor. You're like, yes.
I'm like, okay, but this is like controversy.
Yes, of course.
So
Pre-Me Too.
Pre-Me Too. Didn't really know. Very naive at the time again. Naivety is apparently the thread of this conversation. And I'm like, well, I only have $1.50. Let's do it. Terry Richardson, New York. Absolutely. Holy shit. Okay. So I did. And I flew back to Montreal and moved back to Montreal. And I remember going on set thinking, whoa, how did I get here? This was like that song. What's that song? Oh gosh, Talking Heads, you know? How
Mm.
did I get here? Anyways, it was like that song. It was like, this is insane. Like, how did I wake up in the Bowery Hotel going on set with Terry Richardson when I was just hanging out on the beach, wondering, contemplating life
With $1.50 in your bank account.
with $1.50 in my bank account, thinking, wow, I'm really in trouble, to now being like offered this abundant opportunity to work with one of the best photographers at the time.
And several after that.
Absolutely. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, absolutely. I got to work with the most talented photographers. Cass Bird, she is just exquisite as a human being. Holy smokes. Alistair McClelland, who shoots a lot for, at the time, ID Magazine.
Yeah.
Tim Barber, love this man so much. Shout out to Tim.
Love his work.
Man, yeah, he is one talented human and an absolute doll to work with. He's such a sweetheart. And who else did I work with? Oh, Matteo Montanari as well. Lots of big time models too, which was very intimidating. It was so cool because you got to see the real, true talents working and work with them in a collaborative way was just mind blowing.
Well, tell me about how a shoot like that at that level, how does it operate? Like, could you give an example of, a shoot, nameless shoot that you did, and how the orchestration of everything went? Or was it kind of like, it has to be systematic?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's definitely a formula. It is a formula with also the creativity, intuition built in. So it is definitely a heavy lifting production. You definitely have a very seasoned producer that is helping to shape the structure of the shoot. It starts with a lot of research and conceptual development. So you really have to be prepared, finding out the right way to communicate to the team visually what you're trying to achieve. So there's all this preamble. There's a lot of work. It's so much work. It's months of work. So it's not a quick process. A lot of consideration with who you want to work with, and that is even from talent to vibe, or to how people are on set, and that's also a really big part of it. Choosing the right cast, choosing the right makeup, hair, stylist, like building these teams. The art buying of it is very considered, and you're choosing from everything from talent, diversity, attitude, creativity, because you're basically creating this big ass soup, right? And you want all the ingredients to taste delicious. So that's part of the role too. The production, once you're there, it is a lot of the heavy work is done before. So you're having to do like a shot list. You're having to like articulate exactly what you need to shoot, the ratios, the mood, the compositions, the lighting, everything. So you're really thinking about every minutia detail pre-shoot. Then when you're on set, it's sort of like an orchestra has happened. The music is starting to play and everyone has their role. And we're conducting and we're trying to figure out how to make this work. And at that point, it's a little bit more, for me, for my role, I tend to pull back. And by doing so, I'm hoping that the people that I've chosen to bring into this delicious soup have the opportunity to express themselves and be creative. And I'm there to help guide, but I really want people to feel empowered to create their best work. So that's happening. Meanwhile, I'm behind the scenes making sure that we're actually getting to the deliverables, because this is a lot of money being invested into the shoot. So it is extremely intuitive in terms of like understanding your role as to how to best give people the greatest amount of creativity to work, the greatest amount of autonomy to create their best, and also to know that you have an actual brand that you need to, a point of view you need to stick to, or a actual deliverable that needs to be met. So there's this like kind of fine dance that you're doing. And then of course you go into post, which is another month or so of hard work with retouching or the actual making of these assets and where they go. So it's very, very intense.
Yeah, I can't even imagine all the work that needs to go into something like that. And when we flip a magazine over, we never
Oh
really
my gosh.
consider. That's why, I know I've mentioned this on the pod before, but when I watch a film, I will always watch the credits
Oh my
because I
gosh,
feel
yes.
that I need, like, some part of me needs to see all of the people who just made this incredible thing that I just watched. There's hundreds of people.
Hundreds, and it's far more in depth than a magazine, truthfully. Like it's similar in that it is a large amount of collaboration to make something happen, but it is at a very, very larger scale and more investment in terms of money and budget, for sure.
I'd love to know what, this time in life, if you're going to reflect back on your time at Aldo and all of this, these big projects and fast pace, what made you grow the most during this time?
I think it was, that's a difficult question. There's very many things that I grew from there. I understood more about the process. So it was a really good school for me. So that was number one from a professional standpoint. But from a personal standpoint, I think what I learned was, wow, that's a hard one to articulate. But let's say that I understood that I needed to really take care of myself as a creative to make sure that my energy was and output was respected. So it was, the scale of it is quite large. So it is a very heavy lifting from a energetic standpoint, like the actual work itself. So it was very hard to maintain balance. So the big learning there was how to do this without burning out. Oopsie, I did burn out. How do you restore yourself? How do you respect your creative capacity? Those big lessons were learned at that point. Also, I think when you're there and it was a different time, absolutely, completely, like in context, complete different time for me, it was so exciting. And I couldn't believe I was a part of it. And you were really wrapped up with that hype. But I don't think personally I was as fulfilled. So I think that there was a moment where I needed to find a way to maybe get back in touch with my own purpose, find better ways to restore myself so that I could be creative and not feel depleted and also give back. So there was a lot of personal lessons that came into that, or like how to not come out of integrity when in work. Um, that was a big one.
Yeah, like recreating space for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I really needed to create space for myself. And
And you did it.
I did. Ta-da.
Ta-da. Yeah, you've just had such an incredible career, because after that you went over to Kittenace.
Yes.
You got a call from Shauna
Yeah,
Olston,
yes.
good friend of mine, and you spent some time there, about a year and a half, as their creative director.
That's right.
And then you went out on your own.
Absolutely. So that was a really wonderful experience too. So I needed to come back to Vancouver at some point. I'd been in Montreal for a decade. And I remember the West Coast being very calm. And I love the energy of Montreal. I will always love the energy of Montreal. But at the time, I needed to find that restoration that I was just talking about. So Kittenace arrived. That was such a wonderful experience. Definitely another place where I learned a lot of lessons. A great team of people, wonderful humans. And when that ended, I really wanted to start something different. I wanted to really look at the processes in which I create work and change the way I worked, change the clients I worked with, and who I would give my creativity to. So it just seemed natural for me to start something new. And I didn't want to work anymore with in-house. I didn't want to work in an agency. I didn't want to go into that corporate landscape anymore. It wasn't working for me. So I started a very modest and small studio with a ton of love called Super Bonjour because of my homage to Montreal. And I started it with my best friend Vanda, who lives in Montreal, and we met at Aldo. So there was just a serendipitous moment where we were both looking for something new, and we decided to partner up as a duo and start Super Bonjour about 5 years ago.
Congrats.
Thanks.
5 years.
Ta-da. Yeah, I know, right?
Who knew, right?
Time.
When that time passes, you're like, even with this pod, I'm like, has it been like almost 2.5 years already?
Crazy.
Wow. But I do want to talk about your creative process, particularly like your own. You'd mentioned to me that you do a type of brand therapy with clients so that you take them on a journey. I'd love to know more about this.
Absolutely. So I think all the experiences I've had in the past and working with different agencies and brands, I developed a good sense of like how to make a brand and how to work with creatives. It wasn't always the healthiest way. It wasn't always the honest way or the most authentic way. And I really had a deep look at that to think what was a different way in which we could create work. And I think what we did, well, Vanda and I, was during COVID, so we had a lot of time to think about things. And we're like, let's switch this up and switch out the process. And we realized that one of our greatest skills is empathy. And we wanted to weave that into the process. So what we wanted to do was create an opportunity for us and the collaborator, us and the client, to really have really deep strategic conversations around how they want to show up, how they want to be seen, and really listen. The idea around that is to really immerse ourselves in the reality of the client and present back to them the mirror of what they've shared with us. So sometimes we find that clients have maybe a preconceived notion of this is how I want to show up, this is how I want to look. And what we want to do is show them different possibilities of what else could it be. So it's almost like, I don't know, it's like I'm like a translator of their vision. So it's through my point of view, which makes it unique, but through a lot of deep conversations and work, we can try to create a more unique positioning offer for them. So where do they want to sit? So that way, the unique aspect of it really makes them shine. So it's not necessarily about belonging to a set of codes. So it's more about being seen as who they truly are in an honest way. So the brand therapy is a bunch of workshops that we work with clients to really understand them best and to help them see themselves in the best light possible. So it's really about finding what makes them shine and creating that space for that. Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much that, everyone wants to be seen, but it's really beautiful to also apply it to like client work.
Yeah. Cause there's a lot of guesswork that can happen, interpretations, assumptions. And it's still part of that process. Like that doesn't go away. You're still trying to interpret something, but that clarity is really where it's at. And I think clarity is kindness. And I think that what we're trying to do is create a different way in which to approach our work.
You had also mentioned too that when you're centered and you're grounded and you're calm, you receive creativity best that way. And when you were describing it to me the other day, I'm like, it's like you're channeling something.
Oh my goodness. You know it. Okay. I have to actually get grounded to speak about this. I really think this is for me specifically, I think that creativity for me is a skill in awareness. I'm really observing what's around me. I'm listening to what you're saying. And I have to be grounded in order to receive. I think that everyone is creative. Everyone has the ability to be creative. I think that in order for me to receive an idea or to have clarity, I need to be still. So that gives me, through my breath, calming down, getting grounded, attuning, allows me to really get clear so that I can do my job properly, so that I can actually understand what that other person needs. And also for me to understand, what does that look like? So I guess it's like just being able to find a creative mindset that allows me to be extremely sensitive to what's around me and the creativity
Mm,
that I can actually find. So
yeah.
it's really about being very still and quiet, giving myself the space to actually think about things. And in order to do that, I have to ground. So I use meditation practice in order to feel more attuned to the person I'm working with, the client I'm working with, and also for me truly to be able to be extremely, which is more heightened and more sensitive to understanding the nuances around what I'm creating.
Mm, that's so lovely. How has your passion for spirituality and breath work and the mystical, how has it made you a better person in your own life?
I think what it's helped me do is to understand my wholeness and the interconnection of everything. So for me, what it's helped me see is it kind of goes from I to we when I'm in this space. So I'm seeing more of a life centered approach. I'm thinking about humans, I'm thinking about non humans, I'm thinking about the planet. That's what happens to me when I'm engaged in spiritual practices that I love and respect. It helps me understand the world in a better, more connected point of view. So it's very, very integral for me to keep that part of me alive, and um, it helps guide me so that I'm very much in integrity while I'm at work or while I'm like having a cup of coffee or talking to you, May. Like it's really about that connection. It's so important to me. So I think that those tools have really helped me understand my place in the world and how big it is and how
Yeah.
important it is to really be as human as possible and embrace all those imperfect flaws, et cetera, but to really understand that we're all connected.
Yeah, all of that, all of what you said. I mean, I resonate so much with that. I feel that I very much view life and others and being in connection with others in a very similar way. What are your thoughts on how we could live more joyfully and, um, yeah, more joyfully as conscious and connected humans, particularly when we're in such a capitalist society?
I think that there's a real value in going back to understanding the implications of care. What does that look like? What does care look like in our society? How can we gravitate towards that in a more sustainable way? So flipping out things like scarcity for abundance is really interesting for me. I think it's really cool to think about the economy of care. How do you see yourself in the world? How do you collaborate with humans? How do you walk softly in the forest, as my teacher hero would say? I think that there's also a sense of playfulness and joy in terms of like even what I do and create. I think of it through color and shapes, and putting that out there in the world. It really can affect your mental state or the joy in which you want to experience. So when I'm thinking about um, things that I interact with, like objects, spaces, injecting them with peaceful, colorful, vibrant colors will affect your mood. Round shapes, playful interactions, surprises. So I think about joy being like one of my roles is to be I'm a designer and I create worlds. So I really want to make those playful, joyful worlds for people to interact with. So I think more of that, like who wants to work in a cubicle?
Yeah.
Or like brutalist architecture has its place for sure, and modern art has its place, but there is so much more vibrancy and diversity in nature and in the way that other people perceive the world that creates more joy and play. So
Mm.
it's really allowing for multiple points of view. It's allowing for the space for people to be expressive. That creates joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also it's not a solo operation. It's not an individualistic expression. I think it's a collective expression. So
Mm.
allowing for everyone to like have their place and allow joy to be present in their life. Everyone deserves that, right?
Everybody deserves that for sure. I'm thinking about what you're saying. You said about the shapes in the world, like who wants to work in a cubicle. And I've been thinking a lot about there's this AI artist, and he does these beautiful interiors. And I think his name is Andreas Reisinger, and he uses a lot of circles in
Mm-hmm.
there. And I'm finding myself really drawn to circles
Mm-hmm.
lately. And I don't know what that is, but even in my sound therapy branding, Oto, OTO,
Absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
and I loved it. I loved the circles. Yeah. Anyways, I'm just thinking about shapes that bring me joy and happiness, or elicit some kind of connection in me. And right now, the circle is.
That's so wonderful. And it's interesting too, because it's you, right? So it's what you
Mm-hmm.
find beautiful and joyful.
Yes.
It's not what is expected of you. So sometimes I find like even the wellness space has a specific set of codes to look a certain way to fit in, right? But maybe those aren't joyful for everyone. So it's really about finding what's right for you and using that to express yourself in an authentic way.
Mm-hmm.
So breaking free from sometimes like the I can't pronounce that word. You know what I'm talking about.
Stagnation.
There
Yeah.
you go, girl. Stagnation. I will get it eventually. Of a specific, like, I don't know, set of visual patterns or codes that are expected of a certain industry. Like, you can just do you, boo. Like, that is my advice for
Mm-hmm.
you.
Yeah. Only way to live.
Only way to live, really.
Do you feel like an artist?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I've always felt like that. And even working in commercial spaces as I do, I still feel that, art and creativity are every day for me. It is just the way in which the way I am in the world. Yeah.
Hmm. You had mentioned earlier in the conversation about observing the world, really being interested in the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in culture right now that's fascinating you?
Oh, goodness. I think what's happening right now is it's it's a little dark right now, as you know. So I think that the next step is going to be pushing past that. So I often find that pushing past those more negative places and seeing what's possible is really where the creativity and the trends can be. So you got to get to the next level. And I think that hasn't happened yet. I think we're still working on that and still trying to figure out the right way in which to be seen in the world right now. So it's not a super inspiring place right now. I don't find, unfortunately, but I think that because of that, it will bring inspiration, and I think new things are about to start. I don't know if it's completely like we're not in that place yet, but I'm very excited to see what's new. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
it's we're on it. We're on the cusp.
Yeah, there's a rumbling, I
There's
think.
definitely a rumbling, and I think people are really shaking things up. I think people are really like seeing things for what they are. I think there's a real honesty and vulnerability that's happening, and I think that that's a magical place to be. And I cannot wait to see what's going to happen. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that right now we're still like just post COVID. I mean, it's still
It's so
COVID, right?
sticky. Everything feels so sticky still, like within
Yeah,
you, in the world. You're like, oh, how are we
totally.
all navigating through this goo right now?
I know. So I think that the inspiration will come from that.
Mm,
For sure. I'm just waiting.
mm. I can't wait to see it emerge. It's time.
Yeah, it's time.
You were telling me the other day that you are hoping to eventually have this this space, a space that's rejuvenating and cathartic for you and other people and clients. When you close your eyes, what does this space look like?
Oh my goodness. What does it look like? It's still a mystery to me. I can tell you what it feels like. I am definitely an emotional, feely person, but ideally, I often think about working and collaborating in a very safe, warm space without, the pressures of everyday corporate environments. It's very unnatural to me. So it's really about a space that makes you feel more connected to who you are and being able to create from that space. So sometimes I think about it as it's unattainable. Like it feels like magic thinking in a lot of ways, because it's like, how do you get to it, this utopic place, given that that's,
Does it exist? Does
does it
utopia
really exist, people? I don't know, but I certainly think that there is a possibility to create a space where people feel invited and welcomed and warm and can let down their masks, can let down their walls, and really get real. And during that, that would give you the opportunity to find out what do you want to create, how do you want to build this, what pace makes sense for you. Do we need to rush this urgency situation? Is that really like where we're at right now? Like, let's get real. So the space, I think, would be conducive to real honest conversations, and also allow everyone to feel, including myself, the ability to create with ease. So I've often thought about, what does that look like? My younger self would have thought of it as a retreat or a healing center. And now I think about it as more of like an art project or a theory, or I think about it as potentially even a way in which I work with people and clients. And maybe that's enough, Maybe that space is just the space in which is like people are invited to work with me, and that's okay too.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, there's all kinds of space.
Yeah, right?
I can't wait
we're
to see
getting
this come
trippy
true.
here, but
We
like,
are. No, I love this. Let's go trippy.
I just think that there's just a better way to work. And I think there's a better way to live. And I'm very curious about that. I'd love to try. That is why I'm a creative person. Let's give it a go.
Let's give it a go.
Right?
Yeah, no, I get it. Why not take the chance? Just do it.
You have to.
If it doesn't work, yeah, you might feel a way about it for a while.
Sure.
But
Sure.
you'll never have the regret, and you'd have pushed yourself a little bit more. You'd have grown a little bit more.
I'm just like so in love with everyone I work with. I love seeing creatives flourish. I love seeing clients feel seen. It's so rewarding to me, and having a place to facilitate that is a dream, and it could be a reality. Let's face it. Right. So that's where that space comes from. I think for me, at one time when I was going through burnout, I really wished that space existed for me. And I really wished that the office jobs that I had that opportunity to just give creatives a break. Let's face it, just needed a break. And that's where that came from. And I think after doing lots of work, it just continuously evolves, this idea. So maybe that's the journey on its own. It's just an evolution that keeps popping up and reminding me to stay connected, to myself.
Yeah, I noticed, if I'm thinking back on all of your stories, you've always known when to take space. Like, I mean, sometimes it reached the point of burnout, but like then you were like, no, I got to take the space, or I got to go. Whereas I feel like a lot of people just be like, no, just going to push through this. Like, it's okay. And it's not okay.
It's not okay. But your body tells you too. Like my mind was like, you have to keep working, Rihanna. My self-worth was completely wrapped up in my identity around work. And at some point, my body was like, are you sure? I don't think so. Here's a smackdown.
Mm.
Check this out.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, I can't do this. Like my body won't let me.
Yeah.
It's telling me, it's
It'll
listening to your
always tell
body.
you.
Always. And that's when the breaks happen. So I do have to really think about, I really have to be aware and not push through because it's just not sustainable.
No, it's
And it's
not.
actually, thank you for telling me that, because I've often not thought of myself as someone who takes breaks. I've never thought of myself as doing that because I just feel so much. I felt so much pressure to work and work at a pace that was completely outrageous. And I thought that that was the way to be, you know, that I would receive more love and I would be more worthy the more I worked. The higher I got, the more jobs I got, the better photographers I worked with. I thought that was it. Right.
Yeah.
And at some point you're like, yeah, no, that's not it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. No, I feel like you've known when to take breaks, and sometimes it's not even on that bigger level, but I've been really trying to be better, to continue being better with listening to my body.
Mm-hmm.
So, I go to the gym 3 to 4 times a week, for example. And there are some days where I get up and my body does not want to do it. And I think of all the times, years I've forced myself to just go.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm a little bit better of saying, no,
Mm-hmm.
the body doesn't want this today. I'm going to honor that. Maybe there's a different way of moving today.
Absolutely. I hear you on that. I do think that for a long time, I think I had a really unhealthy relationship with my body and pushing myself. It was more of a punishment. Like, you're not doing enough, Rihanna. Keep going. You need to go to the gym because, you know, you're going to go on set with this hot model. Like, come on. You know, all those crazy pressures that you put on yourself as a woman. And at some point that just stopped. And it became what's nourishing for me. And maybe it is not going to the gym. Maybe it is. It's a different energy, different point of view. I love that that happened for me. I also think that rest is rad. Like, rest is being a badass. I'm a little bit of a badass. I swear a lot. I don't know how many times I swore in this podcast, maybe none, which is quite remarkable. But I've always been a little bit of a rebel. I will stick, the stick in the honeybee, whatever it's called, a wasp nest. I will be provocative at times. And for me, at one point, I was like, you know what's really provocative? Chilling out, resting, taking away that urge to be urgent. That was, to me, how I could express myself in a more rebellious way. And I always talk about the fact that I like zigging when everyone's zagging. I think that that's very difficult to do because it is such a pressure. Everyone is doing the same thing and we really want to belong 100% because we're social beings, but there's some point where maybe we're zigging the wrong way or maybe not. Like, you know, what's right or wrong? I don't even know. But for me, I have to go a different route.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that too. Yeah, that just kind of like marching to your own beat. Like, just gonna go this way. Some people may not like it, but the
That's
right
okay.
people
Absolutely.
will. I'm wondering, you're talking about feeling like you need to keep working. Are you doing enough? I'm wondering, I'm wondering if it's tied to what you said about your grandfather and how he had saved all that money.
Yeah. There's a little pressure around that. I mean, they work so hard. Oh gosh, I'm probably going to tear up. They were just such a delightful caretakers for me. And they worked so hard because they had to, right? That was the only way in which that they could live, and they came from nothing. So I really wanted to honor that. And I really wanted to honor their ancestors, everybody. Like, it was just so much pressure. It felt a lot of pressure for me as a child because I saw it. It wasn't easy and you could see it. And I think also just like straight up society and the urgency and productivity culture that we subscribe to was just a reality. But yeah, I mean, my grandparents worked so hard until the very bitter end. And so I think that there was a big sense of respect for their hard work that I wanted to honor. Yeah.
I'm sure they're so proud of you
I mean,
wherever they are.
I was the first person to go to school, right? Nobody went to school. Nobody had education. People barely, grandparents didn't speak English, couldn't read or write. They're illiterate. And I was the first person. They're like, you're the chosen one. Go, young Jedi. And it was a lot, but I'm so grateful. So grateful.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like if you have a tight relationship with your grandparents, it's another kind of magic.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very lucky.
I loved my grandparents very much. So yeah, I feel that. Well, just a few more questions for you. Second to last question. What does it feel like in your body when you're fully expressed? Like when the Reanna at work and the Reanna being her truest self, the side that may not always be expressed at Super Bonjour, when those things are completely aligned, what does that feel like?
It feels like jumping into the ballroom as a child. It feels like, you know what I'm talking about. Remember the ballroom?
IKEA.
Okay, like forget about all the like weird germs and stuff about it. But at the time, it feels like absolutely jumping into a beautiful pool full of champagne, and you're a bubble and you're just exploding with exuberance and you have no sense of time. It feels like both the most exuberant, playful, colorful burst, and also it feels completely calm too. It's a sense of knowing. It's a sense of being very grounded. It's a sense of ease, peace. That also is part of it. So it's both exciting and like a burst of energy and also completely calm. That's when I know I'm rocking it. And I have no idea what time it is and I don't want it to stop. And it's a different energy from being like overworked from a lack of self-worth or like need to perform. It's a completely different energy. You're still working nonstop, but you are in such abandonment and flow that it feels like you could keep going and everything's possible. It's so energetic and it feels like your heart is completely bursting. The emotions are, I can't even articulate it. I just know that in my body, I feel so warm and cared for and exuberant, effervescent. Effervescent. I feel effervescent.
I love that word.
Like a La Croix, you know?
Or a buble.
Or a buble, depending.
Oh, yeah. No. Yeah, that heart expansion where you're just
Right.
like, I can't stop this feeling.
Oh my gosh. On set, when I'm loving life, I am dancing, I am singing, I am high-fiving everyone. I do not work like normal human beings, I don't think. It is a party. Like, I want people to feel so freaking happy and full of love and joy too while they're working. And I want that environment for everyone. That's how I am. I'm a free, just like the little girl roaming around in my grandparents' farm, picking up ladybugs in the cornfield. I am that girl still on set when things are aligned and I feel seen and everyone else is also feeling good about themselves. It's the same vibe.
Such a beautiful image. I love that. Well, my final question. With what you do, what is it that you want to leave behind in the world? The question I ask everybody.
You ask everyone this question. What a hard question. What do I want to leave behind for the world? I want everyone to feel seen and have the sense of ease, and everyone to feel the joy that they deserve. I just would love that for every human being.
Well, you're spreading that joy, just being you. Thank you so much for being here.
May, you're the best.
If people want to connect with you or the agency, where shall they go?
Absolutely. You can go to www.superbonjour.com, or you can find us on Instagram as well, which is at super_bonjour. You can find me at Reanna time because it's like hammer time, but not. Hammer time. And
Hammer.
yeah, you can find us. Yeah, Super Bonjour is the name of the agency, and I go by Reanna time.
I love it. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here. Thank
you.
you for being such a light, and maybe a sabbatical in LA.
Absolutely. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Yeah, right? Okay.
I would love it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm here for it.
Okay. Let's
Seriously.
talk. Let's talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. As always, thank you for being here and for listening. To learn more about today's guest, visit the episode page for show notes and links on wearethecraft.com. You can find the entire podcast archive here or explore more conversations with past guests on Spotify and Apple. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on these platforms, including YouTube, to get notified when new episodes drop. Any likes and shares on social media are deeply appreciated too. Sound and audio engineering for this show are by Andrew and Jay Bagaspis. All guest portraits and images are by Juno Kim. Appreciate you all and see you again soon.